All right, the Panther-Lair Post-Game on a Saturday afternoon. It's weird to do this and not be sitting here on, like 1:30 in the morning or even like 10 o'clock at night like we were last week. It's weird to be here at 3:30 in the afternoon. This is not typical. We usually do these post-game shows a lot later. It's weird to be here in the afternoon. I wasn't sure, what's the protocol when it comes to doing these things in the afternoon. Do we still do a shot? Like we've done for the past few games. Do we have a drink? Are you guys drinking? Did you drink during the game and you're tuning in still having a beer? Or are you waiting like a responsible adult until later in the evening? It could be hard to watch football sometimes without something cold to wash away some of the concerns. But this one, Pitt, 37-7 win over Virginia, pretty much in the books from the very start. And I know you probably spent the bulk of the game waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know you probably spent the bulk of the game waiting for Virginia to catch up, waiting for Pitt to blow it. Look, I got text messages after Virginia's touchdown, expressing concern that things were about to start turning around. Well, things never turned around. Virginia's bad. There's a reason they only have 3 wins this year. And those 3 wins, one of them was against Georgia Tech. And look, nobody loses to Georgia Tech. What kind of team would lose to Georgia Tech this year? They're in a terrible, they're really bad. But this Virginia team has struggled all season. They're bad. And while I think, that response was brought, or that fact was brought up a number of times on Twitter and the message boards today, like, oh, it's Virginia. Who cares? They're crappy. That's true. But you know what? This Pitt team did lose to Georgia Tech. They also lost to Louisville, who's not very good. And the reality, and they were, a 2-point game in the fourth quarter against Virginia Tech. So this Pitt team is not above or beyond losing to bad teams or playing competitive games with bad teams. So I would say if you have an opportunity to put a bad team away and stretch out a nice 4-touchdown lead on a bad team, no matter how you score those touchdowns, I think you take it and you move on. And that's what Pitt is going to do right now. They're 6-4 overall. They're 3-3 in the ACC. They've put together a couple back-to-back wins against bad teams. But you know what? The bad teams are on your schedule. So you got to win those games when you have the opportunity. And ultimately when this season ends and Pitt is sitting back trying to figure out what happened, or when we're sitting back talking about what happened in this season, one of the things we're inevitably going to bring up is how they couldn't take care of business against a bad team in Georgia Tech, about how that game will come back to haunt them. That's why they're 6-4 right now as opposed to 7-3. And you could probably throw the Louisville game in there as well. That's why they're 6-4 right now as opposed to 8-2, which is realistically where they could and probably should be. And this game was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there was certainly a lot of things that went right for Pitt. And it was really out of reach from the very beginning. I felt like Pitt's defense would have success against Brennan Armstrong. I felt like Pitt's defense would have success against Virginia's offense, because Virginia's offense has been bad all year. For as much as we talk about Pitt's offense and how they struggle and they've got the worst this, they've got the worst that, look, Virginia's offense has been worse than Pitt by, exponential factors. Right? They have the worst offense in the ACC. You might think that Pitt's offense is the worst in the ACC. You might have tweeted things about how Kedon Slovis is the worst quarterback in Power 5 or something like that. Brennan Armstrong is playing worse than Kedon Slovis. Virginia's offense is producing less than Pitt's offense, and they're bad. And I thought Pitt's defense would be able to have success against Virginia. I don't know if I thought they would be 2 interceptions on the first 2 plays of the game, 2 pick sixes on the first 2 plays of the game successful. I didn't know if they would go that far with the success, but I thought they would have success. It was just a question of, could they play as well against Virginia as they did against Syracuse and allow the offense to win while only scoring 19 or 20 points, or would they give up a little bit more and force the offense to maybe make a few more plays? Well, ultimately, they played even better than they did against Syracuse. They didn't give up a touchdown against Syracuse. They did give up 1 in this game, but they also scored 2 of their own. So I guess you would say the defense played even better in this one than they did against Syracuse. And it's funny because Pat Narduzzi was asked after that Syracuse game, is this the best defensive performance that you've had at Pitt? And it was a question I hadn't even really considered myself. They played well against a bad team with a backup quarterback. And so I hadn't really thought too much myself about whether it was the best of all time or whatever. But it's pretty funny that they came out and Narduzzi didn't have much of an answer to it either. But it is funny they came out the next week and played even better defensively than they had last week at Acrisure Stadium. Now they're bowl eligible. They've got a 30-point win over an ACC opponent, no matter how good or bad that ACC opponent might be. And they got 2 wins in a row in games they should win, and they were expected to win, and they did win. Duke will be more of a challenge next week, and we're certainly going to have a lot of time over the next 7 days to talk about that. But they have a little bit, they're playing well right now. The defense is really rolling, and as I'm sure we're going to talk about in this hour, and certainly over the next week, the offense is finding, I think I said the defense is really rolling. I meant to say the defense is really rolling. The offense is, I think the offense is finding some rhythm. I think there were some points that you would look at in this game and say, that was pretty good. You know what I mean? Like that was some actual good offense. Those were some good passes. That was some those were some well executed plays. I think they did some good things offensively. Not all of it, and they certainly shot themselves in the foot a lot. Pitt was called for 9 penalties, and by my count, 6 of those, they were called for 10, but the last one, 2 number 22s, incidentally. That last one was declined because I think Tony Elliott just wanted to go home, understandably. But out of the 9 penalties that they were called for, I think 6 out of the 9 were on offense, and 5 out of those 6 were holding penalties, and only one of them was on an offensive lineman. It's a weird kind of stat there we can talk about more. But look, they ultimately shot themselves in the foot. Now, that's not to say there wasn't questionable coaching. That does not to say there wasn't questionable play calling. That's not to say there weren't questionable sequences or points where you just said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing what you're attempting to do here? Because there certainly were those moments, and we'll have plenty to say there. But I thought there was also some pretty good stuff out of this offense, even on drives that didn't ultimately produce points. Drives where they ended up shooting themselves in the foot and killing drives with bad penalties or bad decisions, bad play calling. But they had some real moments where I thought they looked pretty good, encouragingly good on an individual level and as a unit. So we got a lot to talk about here on the Panther-Lair Post-Game. Of course, you can get in the chat and post your comments and your questions, what you thought about the game. If you want to make sure your comment gets read or your question gets answered, you can be a super chatter. Click the little $sign down there at the bottom of the chat screen. You can kick a couple bucks to the podcast. We appreciate that support for sure. And if you do that, we will definitely get to your comment and your question. These post-game shows, we get a lot of comments. We get a lot of questions in there. We don't get to all of them in the chat during our hour of post-game show here. But we do our best to get to as many as we can. If you really want to make sure that what you have to say gets read on the air or whatever you have to ask gets answered to the best of my ability, you can be a super chatter and we will guarantee to get it to you. Of course, while you're here, click that subscribe button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can turn on notifications. You can get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live. We initially planned to, I didn't know what time we were going to do this post-game show. Thought it might be around 4, then pushed it back to 3:45. Then the game kept moving along, so we did it at 3:30. So we were, I tried to tweet out updates whenever I could about it, but if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the live streams, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and you'll get an alert sent right to your phone, so you never have to worry about missing a live post-game show or the Wednesday night Panther-Lair show or anything like that. Of course, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, we also have the Morning Pit, which we do every morning, Monday through Friday. A new video just kind of breaking down whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting. We have lots of content there every day. Like it's a new video, 20-minute video, half-hour video, however long it takes to talk about all the biggest topics in Pitt sports, as it were. And so you want to make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, never miss any of that. And then, of course, we got to mention Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. That's the home base. That's the mothership. That's the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Is the most comprehensive source, Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. Look, message boards are bumping right now. I'll tell you that. I can't wait to go over and check it out when we're done with this post-game show, see what people are talking about, see what people are thinking about. I know there's probably a lot of praise and probably a lot of complaints. And to be honest, there's room for all of that in this post-game discussion. I think there's probably going to be some of it right here on this show. Probably from me, certainly from you. A lot of praise, a lot of complaints, because there are things to critique here, and there are things I think to praise. And so we've got, we'll be covering a lot of ground right here, and that ground will be covered extensively on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So make sure you go over to the website and check it out. All right, let's talk about this game. Of course, let's get out the Clayton James. I mean, why not? It's 4 o'clock. It's not even 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but I mean, we should probably, conduct ourselves accordingly. It's a post-game show, so to a 30-point win. Do you know the last time Pitt had a 30-point win against an ACC opponent? I'll let you think about that. It was last year. They beat Georgia Tech 52-21. And by my count, this is the 4th time Pitt has beaten an ACC opponent by 30 points or more. Well, 5th time, actually. They had the Georgia Tech game last year. They beat Virginia Tech 47-14 in 2020, which is a remarkable one. If you recall that 2020 game against Virginia Tech, they had like a bunch of guys out due to COVID. Jordan Addison was out. There was all this contact. It was 2020. Remember, there was contact tracing. It would rule guys out of games and take guys out of the mix. And so they were missing a bunch of offensive linemen. They were missing Jordan Addison. It was a mess. And they ended up winning by 33 points. They beat Virginia Tech 52-22 in 2018. And then their biggest win in ACC against an ACC opponent, 2016, they beat Duke 56-14, 42-point win. So they've now won 5. They now have 5 30-point wins over ACC opponents. This one being the most recent, right here, 37-7. By my count, also, if you go since Pitt joined the ACC, they have had 3 games against conference opponents where they've held them to 7 points or less. 2014, they beat Syracuse 30-7. Last year, they beat Virginia Tech 28-7, and this year, 37-7 win over Virginia. Now, I could be forgetting some. 7 points or less. I thought about the Syracuse game last week for a second where they gave up 9 points, but I didn't say single digits. I said 7 points or less. And of course, that's where this conversation has to start. I know we all want to talk about the offense. I know we want to talk about, and I have a lot to say about the offense. Believe me. I mean, I have drive charts and penalty breakdowns that I want to discuss. But we have to start with the defense because that's who started this game. That's who finished this game. That's who won this game, was Pitt's defense. I mean, and really for the second week in a row. You look at Pitt's offense, this week scored 23 points. Last week scored 19 points. Those aren't the kinds of point totals that are going to win you a lot of games unless you get a dominant defensive performance. And giving up 16 points over the course of 2 weeks is a dominant defensive performance. Actually, you know what? I said the offense scored 19 last week. They didn't score 19 last week. They scored 17 last week and 23 this week. So if you're averaging 20 points per game, you're probably going to struggle to win games unless your defense dominates. And in the last 2 games, when Pitt is averaging 20 points per game offensively, the defense is dominated. Never mind the fact that they've scored 16 points of their own with 2 touchdowns and a safety. Combined totals of the last 2 weeks, 289 offensive yards. Syracuse had 145. Virginia had 144. Combined, 5 third down conversions over the last 2 games. Syracuse went 3 of 14. Virginia went 2 of 13. So 5 of 27 third down conversions. Combined total, 17 net rushing yards. Now, college football, NCAA, they count rushing yards as or they count sack yardage as rushing yards. So all the yards you lose to sacks will come off the rushing total. Some people complain about that. I really personally don't have an issue with it. It may not be entirely representative of how a run game performed, or how well an offense ran the ball in any particular game. Sometimes they'll list a separate stat of like non-sack rushing yardage, which I think is valuable. I think that paints a little bit more complete of a picture. But these two teams combined 17 net rushing yards. Syracuse had 25, Virginia -8. And of course, a big part of the reason why is the sacks. 14 total sacks over the last 2 games. We've been wondering, this defense hasn't been doing a great job getting to the quarterback. They haven't been getting sacks. They've only been in the top 25 nationally as opposed to the top 10 or top 5. Well, they're making up for it now. And, breaking down the stats, let me find the defensive breakdown here of who got the sacks for Pitt. 8 sacks today. Kalijah Cansey, 3 sacks. John Morgan, 2. Desmond Alexander had 1. Haba Baldonado had 1. Judson Tallender had 1. That's, obviously the Tallender came on a blitz, I think out of the Delta defensive package, but getting obviously 3 from Cansey. But then Baldonado, Alexandra, and Morgan putting up 4 combined sacks is huge for this defense. I mean, just absolutely huge, because that's been one of the biggest missing pieces for this defense and this team all season is the lack of production from the defensive ends. I think coming into this game, Haba Baldonado had 1 sack. I think John Morgan had 1 sack. Desmond Alexander really hadn't done much until last week. He'd been hurt a little bit, and I think Baldonado dealt with some injuries as well. But for those guys to combine for 4 sacks in this game is absolutely huge. And really just kind of building on a performance from last week. Like I said, Alexander was one of the stars last week. And to have those guys, have those ends produce like that, over the course of 2 weeks is absolutely what this team needs in the final third of the season and heading into these last few games of the regular season. They needed it earlier, too. They needed more production out of the defensive ends. But maybe there's sort of a positive regression to the mean here of they're finally collecting on some of those plays. And they were they were dominant up front. And Pitt blitzed a decent amount, but they also were just winning battles up front. And sometimes when they didn't win the battle right off the bat, they were able to cover. I think John Morgan got a sack that was basically a coverage sack where his initial rush didn't get there. He might have been double teamed even. It didn't get there, but the coverage was good enough downfield, and Brennan Armstrong just didn't make a decision. And on Morgan's second push, he was able to get to the quarterback and get him down. Kalijah Cansey blew up a flea flicker when Virginia's offense was actually kind of humming along a little bit. Virginia's offense was playing well and finally started getting a little bit of momentum, and then they try and run a flea flicker, like double reverse flea flicker or whatever it was, and Cansey just blew it up. He had a huge game, Kalijah Cansey. Obviously 3 sacks tells the story, but in a way, it almost doesn't fully represent how dominant Kalijah Cansey was. He was unblockable in this game. They just could not stop Kalijah Cansey. The only time Kalijah Cansey wasn't making an impact is when he was on the sidelines, when he was resting. And quite frankly, there was not really much of a reason for him to be resting at all in this one. I know, you don't want to play guys 80 snaps or 60 snaps or however many snaps ended up being played in this game. But you need Kalijah Cansey out there as much as possible. And you're going to need him out there a lot next week against Duke and that run game and that quarterback. You're going to need Cansey out there to make plays. And that's what he did today. And, obviously the corners got it started. MJ Devonshire and Marquez Williams with back-to-back pick sixes. Was a huge start. If you can stake your offense a 14-0 lead before they even touch the ball, you're going to be in pretty good shape. But that first quarter, overall was, one of the best quarters we've seen Pitt play all season. Where you have 2 pick sixes, and I think Virginia, they did get a first down on their 3rd possession, and then they ended up punting. And then Pitt scored, a pair of touchdowns with 2 really good offensive drives. I off the top of my head, there's not another single quarter this season that was as good as that. And I think it's going to be hard to find anything really to compare. But on the defense, before we move off of the defense, before we move to the offense, getting the pass rush out of the defensive ends is huge. Kalijah Cansey, dominant as he should be. The linebackers just continue, I think, to play well and handle things well and read things well, and they're just playing better. They're just progressively getting better, really week by week. And I think it's probably what we should have expected. I think there were high expectations for those linebackers, particularly the new guys. And by new guys, I mean new starters or transfers, Shane Simon and Tyler Wiltz, or the new guys who are going to be playing more snaps than they have before, like Bengali Kamara and Solomon DeShields. I think there were high expectations for those guys to come out of training camp and just be really good right off the bat. And they had their moments, they had their flashes, but they also kind of, blew it on a few plays through the early part of the season. But I just think they have progressively been getting better and better and playing pretty well right now. And then the defensive backs, I think, have just been solid all year. They had their opportunities to get their hands on the ball a few times today. And we've seen them have a few of those opportunities at different points this season. And this time they find, the Georgia Tech game comes to mind. This game they capitalized. This time they made the plays and got a couple easy touchdowns sort of right off the bat. And I think Virginia was pretty much done after that. And I think Pitt had locked this thing up after that. Offensively, I think there was some talk. I think there was a feeling that maybe last game Kedon Slovis was as sharp as he had been all season. The Carolina game, he was hitting those play action posts to Jared Wayne, but not much else. But he was at least hitting those, and that was a positive. Last week against Syracuse, he didn't throw a ton, 16 of 23 for 176. So it's not exactly like he lit the world on fire, but he made some key plays when he needed to make them. There were a few plays to Jared Wayne during a drive at the end of the first half. There was a nice play to Jared Wayne to get the ball to the 1 before Sebo Flemister scored the second touchdown of the game. He was sharp as he had been maybe since the second half of West Virginia, first half against Tennessee. I think he built on that today. I think today was one of his best games. Maybe maybe the best game he has played. He finished 14 of 24 for 208 and a touchdown. Throws a touchdown to Bub Means. First touchdown pass that Slovis has thrown to any of the receivers who are currently on the team. First touchdown pass he's thrown to any wide receiver since Jaden Bradley in the Georgia Tech game. Bradley, of course, has since transferred. And so you finally have a receiver on the team with a touchdown pass from Kedon Slovis. That's a step in the right direction. But he just looks sharp. Looking over that first drive, they're running. And then on 1st and 10, they run and pick up a first down. And on first down, Slovis drops back and throws to Bub Means, makes, a really nice pass and a great catch to get 37 yards. And after that, they run it and just kind of run their way in for a touchdown. The next drive, 3rd and 7, Slovis converts with a pass to Jared Wayne for 17 yards. Then he gets, Kanate Mumfield for a short gain. Another incomplete pass to Gavin Bartholomew, but on 3rd and 9, out of the shotgun from, where were there? I forget what yard line they were on, but, close to the end zone. Slovis rolls out to his right, throws to the end zone for Bub Means, and Means makes a nice adjustment and catches the touchdown pass. I thought it was good play from Kedon Slovis. He wasn't perfect. There are a few deep passes that he underthrew. The one pass, the 3rd down pass to Jared Wayne, where Wayne slipped. Wayne slipped because he was trying to stop, and he was trying to stop because the pass was kind of thrown behind him. Slovis needed to lead him a little bit more. Now, conversely, he had another pass later in the game where he did lead Bub Means pretty much perfectly, and Means just dropped the pass. There was a pass to Jared Wayne on one of those first 2 drives that, the 3rd and 7 conversion on the second drive that was, it was a big time throw. It was an NFL caliber throw. And I think you saw a few of those kinds of plays. Now, he also had a deep pass to Kanate Mumfield where Mumfield had separation. He had beat his man and he was headed for the end zone, but Slovis underthrew him a little bit and let the defender break up the pass as opposed to putting it out and giving Mumfield a chance to make that play. I think Slovis has the arm to make those throws. I think, whatever chemistry or connection needs to be there, it's just not there. Maybe because they haven't tried those throws very often in games, and so he and Mumfield weren't really kind of synced up the way they needed to be, not the way that, Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison were a year ago. Those guys really kind of were connected like that, and maybe Slovis and Mumfield are still trying to find that connection. But I mean, that's a touchdown play if he puts it out and puts a little more air under it and gives Mumfield a chance to get under the ball and make a play, as opposed to making Mumfield, as opposed to underthrowing him and letting the defender make a play. But I thought, so obviously they scored 2 offensive touchdowns in the first quarter. They only scored 9 points after that, all field goals in the second half. I think when you look after those first 2 drives, kind of what happened and how it went down, it was just sort of I don't want to say a comedy of errors, but there was a litany of errors that caused this thing to fall apart. So they score the first 2 drives. They come out for their third drive. Everything's going great. They go out of the Wildcat on first down with Owen Drexel playing for the first time since the Tennessee game. And the snap is low and they fumble and they lose a bunch of yards. Now, they kind of get that back, but then they have a holding call and it pushes them out of range. And they have to punt. The next drive, they get a holding call and they can't overcome that and they have to punt. The next drive, final drive of the first half, they get a holding call. Again, holding calls. And it's on, one holding call is on Jared Wayne, one's on Owen Drexel, one's on Carter Johnson. And it pushes them out. They can't overcome that. They don't have the kind of offense like last year's offense. And this isn't about offensive scheme as much as about personnel. You didn't have Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison and Lucas Krull. Last year's offense, if they were in 1st and 20 or 2nd and 17, you didn't feel too panicked because there was a pretty good chance they could pick that up. A penalty on first down wasn't a drive killer for that offense the way it is for this offense, simply because this offense is not built to be explosive like that offense was. And so when they would have these holding penalties on those final 3 drives of the first half, they were drive killers because this offense it's not built to overcome those. First drive of the second half, they start off running the ball well. They're doing great, actually. They're running the ball. They get across midfield, and they come out on a first down play, and that's when Slovis takes the shot to Konate Mumfield. And I don't actually, after the fact, you look at it and say, oh, why wouldn't you just keep running? You were running the ball well. Why would you stop? And I think there's some, I think that's a fair argument to make. You're up 28-0. Your defense is dominating. Why don't you just try and shorten that second half as much as you can? Keep handing it off. You've got the best running back in the ACC. Just keep grinding away. But at the same time, the play was there to be made. You know what I mean? Because you're running so well, Virginia is locked in on that. And was it a play action? It was a play action pass too. They go under center, they run play action, and he's got Konate Mumfield for a touchdown pass. But he underthrows him and ends up getting, batted down incomplete. Now on 2nd and 10, they hand it off on a pretty predictable run that only gets like a yard or something. And now you're in 3rd and 9 and everybody knows what's going to happen. If you were going to throw on first down, I think you needed to be committed to throwing on 2nd down if the pass was incomplete. Because you need to pick up more yards than what the run was likely to get there. And so they end up punting on that drive. The next drive, they get down inside the 10. They're facing 3rd and 6 from the 8. Again, still up 28-0. I don't think Virginia had scored yet at that point. And they run the ball. They hand it off to, I think, Rodney Hammond on 3rd and 6 from the 8. I just didn't care for that. Take a shot toward the end zone. Throw into the end zone. You're at the 8-yard line. You've got a lot of options there. You've got guys you can trust. You've got, Konate Mumfield can probably take a short pass and turn it upfield. Bob Means has already shown he can make a play in the end zone. Jared Wayne can make a play in the end zone. This guy named Gavin Bartholomew, probably somebody you could go to in that situation. And instead they hand it off and settle for a field goal. The next drive, you want to take as much time off the clock as you can. You just want to settle in and just grind this thing out. And they go Wildcat on the first 2 snaps. And they don't get the first down out of the first 2 snaps. They're at 3rd and 2. They finally bring Keaton Slovis back over to be the quarterback, and he hands it off for a run that gets stuffed. 3 and out. That might have been their only 3 and out of the game, actually. Let me just look real quick. They had the 3 and out after the Wildcat miss snap on the 3rd drive of the game. And then they had the 3 and out, on this one I'm describing here. So, I don't know why you go Wildcat. You've got a good running game. You can run the ball by handing it off to Izzy Abanikanda. He's really good. Rodney Hammond's really good. Sibo Flemister's pretty good. you don't need to go Wildcat in that situation. Stop trying to get cute. Just hand it off with your offense. And then, the next field goal drive, this one's in the fourth quarter, they get down inside the 10 again. All right, they're at the 9. They're, again, facing another 3rd and 6 from inside the 10. And, after the second down play, I think it was a run, it was a handoff, got a couple of yards. They hurry up. And they hurry up back to the line of scrimmage and quick snap the ball. And Keaton Slovis tries to roll out to his right and has to throw it away quick because there was, he was under pressure. There wasn't good protection. I don't know why you're trying to hurry up there. You have a 3-touchdown lead or 3-score lead. What are you trying to hurry up, catch the defense off guard, I guess, and throw it there? You didn't have time to set the protection. I don't understand it. I don't get it. So it's a funny sort of mix in this game where you had Keaton Slovis make some really good throws and also miss some throws that he probably should be able to make. You have some pretty solid sequences on offense and then just some absolute head scratchers of what are you even trying to accomplish in this situation? What are you hoping to do? And so, it's a little bit like the whole season, to be honest, with the main difference being that their defense was so dominant that it kind of didn't matter what Pitt's offense did. I mean, defense won this game 14-7. Ultimately, if you want to look at it this way, Pitt's defense outscored Virginia's offense 14-7. So, Pitt's offense really didn't need to do anything. They could have just taken a knee every down, and they end up winning the game. I think I think Bub Means had a really good game. What did he finish with? Let's see his final stats. Bub Means finished with 3 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. Mumfield, I think Kanate Mumfield had a really good game, 7 catches for 60 yards. Jared Wayne, 2 for 40. I liked how all 3 of those guys played. They weren't perfect, but I think Kanate Mumfield is heating up as he's been getting more targets and better looks. He's getting the ball in space, and I think he's making some good plays. I think he's showing what he can do. He's had a couple of good games in a row here. Bub Means now with some big catches. He had a good game at Carolina, I think it was. 1 or 2 really good catches there, and then 3 big catches in this game. And Jared Wayne continues to be really solid. Those 3 guys combined for 190 yards on 12 catches. They had good games. I think those guys produced and continue to sort of improve as long as they get the opportunities to make plays. If Keaton Slovis gives them the opportunities to make plays, they've been making plays of late. I think Slovis continues to get better and settle in and get more comfortable. Izzy Abanikanda, 24 for $121, averaged 5 yards a carry, scored a touchdown. Good day at the office for him. Pitt ends up running the ball for 189 yards on 48 carries. That includes 3 kneel downs for -9 yards. So, you take that out, you're looking at 45 carries for 198 yards, I guess, and a touchdown. That's pretty good. No long runs, really. The longest run was a 13-yard carry by Izzy Abanikanda. He had a couple others that were like 10 or 12 yards, but it wasn't like they were going 60 yards or anything like that. Just real grinded out, solid, workman-like day that turns into a 30-point win. Almost 400 yards of total offense. Pitt goes 6 of 15 on 3rd downs. They pick up 21 first downs. This was a solid offensive performance. If they could just stop shooting themselves in the foot with penalties in the first half and questionable decision making and play calling in the second half, there's no reason they could have very well scored 50, 60 points in this game. I think the opportunity was there. They just, still kind of got in their way, which is probably what this offense is going to be this season. It's what they have been this season. It's probably what they're going to continue to be this season. I think I've said over the last week, I've kind of given up. I don't want to say giving up hope, but I'm not waiting for this offense to magically click. It's 10 games. It was 9 games at that point. It's 10 games now. They're not going to magically all of a sudden click and it's all going to come together. But I think you can see some incremental progress. And I think we've seen it the last couple weeks. And I think we saw a little bit more today. All right. I'm talking a long time here. We got to get to the chat and see what everybody's talking about in the chat here today. Super chatters. Let's see. Joe News starts off and says, I heard from people close to number 86 that he transfers. He says 86 is 90% sure he's in the portal at the end of the season. Well, look, Gavin Bartholomew, El Barto, as he's affectionately called on this podcast, he's not getting the ball. He had one target today. He needs to be used. He can be used more than that. He can help the offense more than that. I'm not advocating anybody transfers or anything like that. I'm advocating Pitt uses him and gets him the ball, partially to, make him happy if that's what he needs, and partially because it will help them win games. They are a better team if they they have more success on offense if they throw the ball to El Barto. Biz is a super chatter, says still no Gavin, disappointing. Yeah, it is. You need to get the ball to 86. It doesn't make any sense of why El Barto's not getting used. He can make plays, and I know there's an emphasis on the passing game on the run game, and they did run the ball 45 times as opposed to 24 pass attempts. But you gotta, you have to get the ball to him. He can help you. He can make plays. Another super chatter comes in. RJC Man 38 is the super chatter. If you got a comment, I'll get to it. I don't know if you have a new comment. I'll be sure to read it. Keep an eye out for it. But Montana Marie started us off with the chat. Says, do you know if that was a college football record for the fastest 7 points and then 14 points? I couldn't find an existing record to compare. The game could have been put out of reach even sooner if Keaton Slovis makes some better throws on a few to Bub Means and Jared Wayne. Could be the difference makers in a big game. Well, they're all big games at this point, but I agree with your point. Slovis had a few opportunities. I think he did make some big throws. He's also got, he's got a few that he probably is going to look at and say, oh, geez, if I put that out there for Konate Mumfield on that first down pass on the first drive of the second half, he's scoring a touchdown there. Instead, I underthrow him. I don't doubt the arm strength with Slovis. I think he knows he's got it. I just think a pass like that, I think it's got to be a chemistry, timing, in sync kind of issue between Slovis and Mumfield. That they just don't have it yet. They're not connected like that yet. And maybe it takes more than 10,000 passes, whatever the Joe Burrow model was that Slovis tried to emulate over the summer. Maybe it takes longer than that to get sort of in sync the way that you need to be with your receivers, and the way that you need to be to be able to place that ball when you got an opportunity for a touchdown. And I think there were a few others that he kind of underthrew a little bit, and that's something he needs to improve. But I think on the whole, well, I shouldn't say on the whole, because there were positives and negatives for Slovis today. I think he had some pretty good throws, though, and made some pretty good decisions, and he was protected, too. I think he was sacked once. Let me see if they even officially gave UVA's defense any quarterback hurries. They gave him 2, but no sacks. So, Keaton Slovis kept pretty clean. Offensive line did a pretty good job protecting him. Is that because Owen Drexel was back? I'm not sure. Is that because they had Branson Taylor and, Mac Gonsalves out there? I'm not sure. I think Gonsalves has done a better job at left tackle than right tackle, but today he was out there at right tackle. Either way, they protected well. They kept Keaton Slovis protected, and this is a Virginia team that was third in the ACC in sacks coming into today. They had 30 sacks through their first 9 games. They were behind, I think, Louisville and Miami were the top 2 in the conference in sacks, 34 and 32, I think. And then Virginia had 30 and Pitt had 29. Now Pitt's got 37 now. We'll see how that stacks up to the, obviously they jumped over Virginia since Virginia had none. But Keaton Slovis had a clean pocket, and I think he made a lot of good passes out of it. RJC Man 38 is, it was a super chatter, says, Frank and Pat not using Bart is just stupid, and Slovis is not progressing, not good enough today. I think he is progressing. I don't know how you could watch that game and say, boy, Keaton Slovis hasn't gotten any better since, the Rhode Island game, or hasn't gotten any better since the Georgia Tech game. I think he was much better today, and he was much better last week, and he was much better against Carolina than he was against Georgia Tech. Even if Carolina, all he hit was a few play action post patterns, he still did that better than he did anything against Georgia Tech. And I think he played better last week than he did against Georgia Tech. I think he played better this week than he did against Georgia Tech. Yeah, I think there has been progress. I think he is improving. I think the scheme still has certain issues and things that need to improve. But you know, I think Keaton Slovis individually is getting better. Biz says, why did they go hurry up in the second half? So that's pretty interesting. Look, was that the first drive of the second half? Yeah, they used tempo to come out in the second half. My guess, it was kind of working. It wasn't a bad thing. I mean, you obviously want to eat clock there. You want to take time off the clock, and you want to kind of run things down, and you want to basically get out of the game as fast as possible. But when it's halftime, even though you're up 28-0, you can't just entirely sit on the ball. You can't just entirely just sit back and try and milk as much clock as possible. There comes a point where you do that, but I don't think you needed to do it right out of the half. I think they wanted to come out. They got the ball first to open the second half, and I think they wanted to try and strike fast, go up 35-0, and see if they could just get Virginia to basically quit, which had more or less happened almost at that point anyway. And so I think, I don't have a problem being aggressive on that first drive of the third quarter. And like I said, they came out and ran and went up tempo. They got to first down at the Virginia 48, and that's when they took the play action shot to Mumfield. I don't mind being aggressive. You know what I mean? Run the ball, using tempo, get Virginia on their heels, and then hit them with a play action shot deep on a play that was set up well. It worked. It worked. It was well executed by pretty much everyone except Keaton Slovis, who just underthrew the pass a little bit. I don't hate that. I think eventually, and certainly once you get to the fourth quarter, you're trying to slow it down as much as possible. And I think even late in the third, they took the ball near the end of the third quarter with just a few minutes left, maybe about 3 minutes, and they ended up going 3 and out. But I thought that was a drive where they would try and slow it down, and that was the one where they came out and ran the Wildcat the first few plays of the drive. I thought that was a drive where they might try and slow it down, extend, carry the possession into the fourth quarter. At that point, you're up 31-7, and try and just milk it as much as you could. And I think that was the goal, but they just failed to do so. I don't mind coming out hot at the start of the third quarter and trying to make a statement right off the bat and add on to that lead and make it a 35-point game. I don't mind that. Let's see. CLN ETN says Slovis always seems to underthrow his receivers. I don't know about always. I don't know if he always underthrows his receivers. He does sometimes. I think he's had a few that he's overthrown as well. I think I think there's probably some timing and chemistry. And maybe I'll ask Pat, if I remember, I'll ask Pat Narduzzi about this on Monday. I think there are timing elements that maybe, particularly on these deeper passes where you got to put the ball in a certain spot, maybe they just don't have that chemistry yet. You'd like to think they would by game 10. Even if it's only game 9 playing together, game 8.5, or however you want to count it. Keaton Slovis got here in January. Kanate Mumfield got here in January. Bub Means got here over the summer. You'd like to think that you could, develop that chemistry by now, with as much as they probably threw together over the summer and in training camp and up until this point during the season. But it doesn't seem like it has happened. It doesn't seem like they're totally connected. And Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison weren't perfect at it in 2020 either. They got much better at it in 2021. After they had that extra time working together, where they've been together for a year working together, getting the timing right on those deep passes. And maybe that's just what it takes. Maybe it just takes a little bit more time, because the routes are being run, the guys are getting downfield, the guys are getting open, and Slovis has the arm. It's just that timing's just not there. It's just a little out of sync. But I think they're close enough that, I would look at it and say, hey, I bet they connect on some of those passes, next year or maybe even next week. It can be sort of an incremental progress type of thing. And I think there has been incremental progress to this point, and I think there will continue to be. I would think the passing game should look better next week than it did this week and continue improving and be even better, if you've got all the same pieces back next season, which I think there's a pretty decent chance you will. I think it can look even better next year. Maybe some of it is just first year working together, which if you don't have the elite of elite talent, and you can have really good talent, but not necessarily elite talent. If you don't have that elite talent, maybe it takes a little more time. Let's see. The Panther Room says, it's a big if, but if we can win the next 2 games convincingly and Izzy has 100 yards, we could be in the Gator Bowl. I think that would be our best bowl game. They mentioned us on their YouTube. Yeah, I tend to start really digging into the bowl game projections after another week or so. Once you get a sense of how things are shaking out, who's going to be in the conference championship games, and who's kind of fitting into which slots here and there. Joe, I don't know if it's Giglio or Giglio from North Carolina. I'm sure I'll start retweeting him soon. He's a ACC reporter based out of the Triangle. He's tied in with ACC people, and he tends to have good intel and info on the bowl placements and projections. So we'll start keeping an eye on his stuff coming up here soon. I don't know. I feel like we've seen the baseball stadium bowl games mentioned a few times, either the Pinstripe Bowl or the Fenway Bowl. I got to say, I wasn't a big fan of the Pinstripe Bowl. They had great food, but not a great setup for covering a football game. I don't know what Fenway would be like. I've never been to Fenway before, so maybe that would be kind of cool. Never been to Yankee Stadium, and that ended up not being that great. So we'll see where they end up. But like you said, I mean, they have to take care of business in these next 2 games, and Duke might be the tough one out of these final 2. Miami's always going to be a challenge, but Duke looks pretty good this season. They've had a pretty good year. WVU has the lowest poverty rate in the country. Well, that's quite a username you got there. It says, great game, but our quarterback play is still average. Maybe. It's improving. I would say it's improving. I feel like the quarterback play is improving. I don't know if everybody would agree with that. I think the quarterback play is improving, which is, given what we've seen through the first 9 games before today, and even including today, I think you just look for improvement. There was a point up until about maybe the Carolina game, maybe before, where I kept thinking it's going to click. It's going to click. It's going to come together. It's just going to click. It's all of a sudden they're just going to turn a corner. Well, I don't think things happen that suddenly, and I don't think for this offense it's going to happen that suddenly. I don't think it's going to be a before and after moment. I think it's going to be sort of slow, steady progress, incremental improvement, and probably some steps forward and some steps back. There's not all going to be steps forward. But as long as you keep seeing some steps forward, you feel good about, how that's going. And I think we've seen some steps forward, even today. I think today there were some steps forward. Christian L says, I would like to play a rival in a bowl game. If it's going to be a sleeper bowl, Notre Dame, Penn State, Cincinnati, etc. Well, yeah, that would be the ideal. It would be great to get one of those teams in a bowl game. If you could get a bowl game against Penn State, that would be fantastic. I think they're going to be out of your league. But, if you could get a bowl game against, I don't even know if I would include Cincinnati. It's like a mix, right? You could get a bowl game against, a Notre Dame or a Penn State that's likely going to be a more challenging bowl game, or you could end up in a bowl game against like a MAC opponent where maybe you've got a better chance of winning. And nothing's guaranteed. I'm not assuming anything, but maybe you have a better chance of winning, like a Bowling Green or an Eastern Michigan and Detroit type of situations, even though both of those games were a lot closer than anyone expected them to be, but they ended up being wins. Is it more important to, obviously you want to get to 9 wins no matter what. I guess, it kind of doesn't matter who you play. You want to try and get to 9 wins if possible. But yeah, it would certainly be more fun if you could see it against a rival, someone you know, someone you dislike. Mr. Super Z's says, we should have never lost to Georgia Tech. Yeah, that's a big problem. That's the game that you wish you could have back. And I think, when you look at last season, you would point to the Western Michigan game. That would be the one you wish you had back. You could probably say Miami as well, but Western Michigan is a game you should have won. You shouldn't have lost that game. And Georgia Tech is going to be that game for this team. Even if you keep the Louisville loss and say things just sort of fell apart at Louisville, at least you're 8-3 right now, or 7-3, excuse me, instead of 6-4. 7-3 looks better than 6-4, feels better than 6-4, and it takes your worst loss off your resume. Not that anybody really gives a good damn about Pitt's resume at this point. Resume talk is sort of silly when you're talking about a team in their position, but that is their worst loss, and it's sort of an inexcusable loss. It's an unforgivable loss, but it's one that they have to wear, and you're not going to get rid of it. Just like the Western Michigan game hung around Pitt's neck all of last season, even though they still accomplished quite a bit, you're not really going to get away from that Georgia Tech loss. It happened, but that is the worst one. Yeah, I agree about that. Will says the offense is still pedestrian, but give credit to Keaton Slovis for hitting receivers deep in stride and throwing the ball away instead of taking a sack, and the running game's still doing its thing. Also, the pass pro from all of our running backs is fantastic. Yeah, I agree. I agree on what you're saying. I mean, this offense still has its issues. I think there's still issues in the scheme. I think there's still issues in how players are being used. I think there's still issues in how it's being coached. It just doesn't seem. I mean, there are too many questions about why certain things are being done or why certain decisions are being made. But I like some of the individual. I like some of the individual performances, and I don't say that to mean that this guy or that guy. I mean, I think the whole offensive line. I think the offensive line played well. I think the receivers had a pretty good day. I think Keaton Slovis again showed some progress. I think the running backs played well. I think there were good offensive performances today. The holding penalties were a problem, and it's pretty remarkable that there were 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and only one of them was on an offensive lineman. Jared Wayne had one. Carter Johnson had one. Gavin Bartholomew had one. And Bub Means had one. Owen Drexel had the only holding penalty on an offensive lineman. So that's that's a weird one. You wouldn't typically get that, I don't think. You wouldn't typically have all these penalties on wide receivers and tight ends. But that was kind of how it worked out today. But that killed a number of drives. And I think this game, I don't know, I wonder how we're talking about it today, if it's 44-7, you know what I mean? Or 47-7, or 51-7, or something like that. 49-7, which it very well could have been, I think, if not for some of those drive-killing holding penalties. So we might have a slightly different view, even if, you still miss a few of those deep passes. Let's see here. Mark Karsten, sorry, Mark, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Mark K says, is Clayton James an official sponsor? No, Clayton James is not an official sponsor. I went to Tennessee this summer, took a vacation there, and I didn't want any of the nonsense like moonshine. I was really disappointed by moonshine. I expected to go get some moonshine in Tennessee, and it would be like the moonshine I had like in college that was like gasoline. You know what I mean? Like you really felt like you could run your car on it, and it burned going down. Like you didn't want to be around open flames when you were drinking that stuff. So at first, when I was in Tennessee this summer, I went looking for the gasoline moonshine, and I couldn't find any of that. It's all flavored and sweet and sugary. I was like, this is nonsense. Get this out of here. This is for the tourists. Where are the real moonshine stills? And I couldn't find them. So then I went looking for Tennessee whiskey, because I heard Tennessee whiskey. It's a different thing from Kentucky bourbon. And like the best I could find, like at least where we were, was in a liquor store, and it was Clayton James. So it's not an official sponsor. It's just what we have on hand. So, but it's good though. It's good, smooth Tennessee whiskey, I guess. I'd like to try more. Bill Florigan is a super chatter. He says, I'm still scratching my head on some of the sets and play calls from Frank Signetti. This would have been a perfect game to work on the passing game. Well, that's, I mean, Bill, we could probably go back to the Rhode Island game for that. And I complained quite a bit after the Rhode Island game that it was a missed opportunity for this team to work on the passing game. They didn't. They just came out and ran it a lot and threw screens. Do you remember that? They threw screens. And it was like, what are you doing here? Your quarterback hasn't played in a game and a half. And now you're playing against a team that you should have no problem beating. You should be able to work. You should be able to treat it like a practice, like a scrimmage, and work on things, and not just try to have a game plan and stick to your script, but actually work on things. Let's try and work out the deep passing game. Let's try and work out this. Let's try and work out that. And instead, they ran screens and handed the ball off. I don't think they attempted any passes downfield. It didn't make any sense. I don't know if I would approach this game that way. I wouldn't necessarily go into a conference game and say, okay, we're going to try and, even once you get ahead by a little bit, I don't think I would go into it and say, all right, we're going to just try and, we're going to try and work on this or work on that. I think, they did take a few shots. They did try to throw downfield. They ran it off of play action and really got a great look. You know what I mean? On that first drive of the second half. I mean, they got a great look off of play action downfield. I mean, it was the exact, that play, and I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it and see if I'm just making more out of it than I should. But that deep pass to Konate Mumpfield was sort of the epitome of what this offense should be able to do. Run the ball effectively, get a team on its heels where they're so focused on trying to stop your run that you hit them quickly, running tempo, you hit them quickly with a play action shot. And it was pretty well set up. But there was a lot that I didn't understand. I don't understand why you go to the Wildcat when you go to the Wildcat. I probably wouldn't have used the Wildcat at all in this game. You were having some success running the ball. I think you go to the Wildcat out of desperation, not in a game where you're running it okay, which I think they were. I don't understand 3rd and 6 from the 8, you hand the ball off. Even if you have a lead. I mean, you're at the 8-yard line. It's 3rd and 6. Try and throw one into the end zone. I don't understand 3rd and 6 from the 9 where the game is winding down and you go hurry up back to the line of scrimmage and try and throw before you really get set. I mean, there were plenty of things that I didn't understand. There were plenty of confusing decisions, not necessarily from the quarterback, but confusing decisions from the play calling and the play design, those kinds of things, the scheme. Nick M says Gatlinburg moonshine is the same stuff you can buy at a Target in Ohio. Yeah, exactly. It's bad. It's not good. It's too sweet. Nick M says the best game Slovis has played. Dude threw a terrible pass to Means that turned into a touchdown through pure luck and overthrew multiple would-be touchdowns. Yes, Wayne slipped and Means dropped one, but Slovis was pedestrian at best. Well, here's the thing, Nick. All right, like when we talk about when you talk about maybe being the best game Keaton Slovis has played, all right, I'm not saying he was perfect. He underthrew a few guys who were open deep that he could have hit if he had put a better touch on the pass. I'm not saying he was perfect. All right, the Bub Means touchdown. I mean, he moves around, he sets his feet and made a throw, and Means came back to it and made the play. I just think looking on the whole, he made more good throws and gave his receivers more opportunities to make plays in this game than he had in previous games. It wasn't a perfect game. I'm not claiming it was a perfect game. I'm not going to claim that he didn't have a few throws he probably would like to have back. I'm not going to claim that he didn't miss on a few throws. What I am going to say is that I thought he threw, his good passes were as good as anything he's thrown this season, and he had more of them than he's had in just about any game this season. I thought it was a pretty solid game for Slovis. Average, above average, pedestrian, whatever you want to call it. We've kicked this kid quite a bit over the first 9 games of the season. We've kicked him quite a bit about the bad plays and the missed throws and the missed reads and all those things. He had a pretty solid game today, and I think we can give him credit for that. Just as much as we were willing to sort of throw dirt on him when he misplays earlier in the season. So that's just my thought. I mean, I thought he was pretty solid. RJCman38 says, can you run numbers on second half production over Narduzzi era? Very important stat as to why I and so many others are unhappy. Yeah, I mean, I think I did this with you before, RJC, man. And actually, Pitt has you know what Pitt's most productive quarter has been this season coming into today? The fourth quarter. They've scored 80 points in the fourth quarter this season. It's more than they've scored in the first, second, or third quarters. You know, the numbers on production. That's why I and so many others are unhappy. I don't know what to tell you. You know, there's a feeling that they don't make any second half adjustments. They don't make any halftime adjustments. Well, you know, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're better in the second half, and sometimes they're better in the first half. I've never I don't think there's anything you could say is just sort of a big issue with the Pat Narduzzi era that they've been really bad in the second half, or make terrible adjustments, whatever. I mean, I don't know. Look, today, hey, they didn't score any points in the second quarter, and they scored 9 in the second half. You know what I mean? They didn't score any points in the second quarter, but they scored 3 in the third quarter and 6 in the fourth quarter. So they did better in the second half than they did in the second quarter. The offense scored 14 points in the first half and 9 in the second half. So it's a drop-off, but only -5. Adjustments. They didn't make adjustments. They did this. They did that. I don't know. I think, if you come out of this game and you want to start griping about 8 years of halftime adjustments, I don't know what to tell you. This is a team that has been struggling to find itself throughout the season, trying to figure out its identity on offense throughout the season. It's had ups and downs, steps forward and steps back. It's had some bad losses against bad teams, and now they've strung together a couple wins against some bad teams. So if nothing else, after losing to Georgia Tech and Louisville, who are not very good teams, they've now beat Syracuse and Virginia, who are not very good teams. So if nothing else, I'm going to give them credit for that. In addition to 2 really outstanding defensive performances and an offense that I think is sort of slowly and incrementally getting a little bit better, finding its groove a little bit more, settling in a little bit more, getting a little more comfortable. It's not perfect. It's not there yet, but it's getting a little bit better. All right. Last one here. Chris, somebody named Chris, says, Chris, the O-line looked good, and it seems like Slovis is regaining his confidence. Do you agree that Pitt looks like they have turned the corner and are in a good place for confidence? So here's what I would say. I hesitate about things like turning the corner, because I think it rarely happens that there's sort of a true defining before and after moment. I think even when you think that a player or a team or a unit has turned the corner, they might keep making steps forward, but there's still going to be a step back. Slovis, big time pass to Jared Wayne, and then later overthrows or underthrows Kanate Mumfield. You know what I mean? He, really nice pass to here, and then questionable pass to there. Pass protection kind of holds up. Pass protection gives something up. There are steps forward and there are steps back. I do agree about the confidence, though. I think this looks like an offense where Keaton Slovis looks more comfortable. Keaton Slovis looks more confident. I think the receivers look more comfortable and more confident. I think they look like they're a little more confident about the quarterback play. I think they look like they're more comfortable with the quarterback. I do feel like, while I don't know that they've turned a corner necessarily in their level of play, because I think there probably will continue to be steps forward and steps back. Next week against Duke, there will be at least one series where the offense comes off the field and the fans at Acrisure Stadium boo. I guarantee it. It's going to happen. There's going to be a 3 and out. There's going to be a play where he missed, Gavin Bartholomew wide open on the right flat and tried to force a pass that either gets picked off or broken up 3 yards short of the sticks. It's going to happen. There's still going to be those sort of snafus and flaws and errors. But I think they will. I do agree about the confidence. I do think they are showing some more confidence. I think they're getting a little bit better. And I think they will continue to take a few steps forward. Again, that incremental progress, which I think is what you should want to see at this point. If you're still holding out hope for this to turn into last year's offense, I mean, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. Like that message was sent loud and clear weeks ago, maybe months ago, that this is not the 2021 offense. Keaton Slovis is not Kenny Pickett. Kanate Mumfield is not Jordan Addison. this team is not that team. But this team can do some things pretty well, and this team is progressing and getting better at some things. Particularly some areas where maybe they weren't so good earlier in the season. I think they are getting better. And I'm talking about the offense here. I mean, I think the defense has been pretty good all season. They've been great the last 2 weeks. But when we talk about the offense, I think they are getting better. They just they have to keep sort of moving forward, taking steps forward. And I think today was another one against a decent defense. Like, Virginia's not a bad defense. They're one of the better defenses statistically in the ACC. So they didn't just go out and beat up. I mean, they did better against this defense. Well, I guess they did a little bit better against Carolina's defense. They scored, 24 against Carolina, and they scored 23 today, right? 37 minus 14. So they did a little bit better against Carolina's defense, who was, statistically the worst defense in the ACC. But they were only 1 point worse today against a defense that rates much higher statistically in the ACC. So, they did it against a decent defense. And again, this is a situation where the areas where it fell apart, drives were killed by clearly identifiable, correctable issues. These holding penalties. You lose 3 drives in the first half. You come out and score on your first 2 drives. We seem to be ignoring that fact that they came out and scored touchdowns on their first 2 drives. The next 3 drives were all killed by holding penalties. That's identifiable. That's correctable. That has nothing to do with Keaton Slovis's passing or Jared Wayne's pass catching or Bub Means' hands or pass blocking or any of that. It's holding penalties. And holding penalties, not just holding penalties, but one on a receiver, one on an O-lineman, and one on a tight end. So kind of spread out. It's not just like, well, this O-line stinks, so they have to hold every play. They only got called for 1. And it was a center. It wasn't even a tackle. So, bad offenses find ways to lose. Bad offenses find ways to kill their drives. And so, you understand that. You can't create a caveat, well, it was just because of a holding. But I think they were moving the ball well. They just got in their own way. They killed their drives more than Virginia killed their drives on almost all of these situations. I don't think there were too many possessions where Virginia really kind of made it happen. Now you could say, well, Virginia caused them to have to hold because of how the pass rush or whatever. But on the whole, I think this offense stopped itself with those penalties, particularly in the first half, more than Virginia stopped them, which, depending on how you want to look at it, and you get to choose, could be viewed as at least somewhat encouraging about this offense. All right, let's see if there's anything else here before we run out. Let's see. Yep, most people are just saying, look, stop complaining. Pitt got the win. Save the complaining for when they lose. That's right. Look, Pitt's 6-4 right now. They're bowl eligible. They're going to be playing in a postseason game. I think there were lots of people after the Georgia Tech game who said Pitt might not even make a bowl. Well, they made a bowl. They're going to be in a bowl game. We'll see where that is in a few weeks. For now, they've got an opportunity to keep building. 2-game winning streak, 3-3 in the ACC. There's a chance to keep winning. It seemed silly to talk about them winning out, and that still is going to be a tough challenge. They're going to have to play better than they did today offensively. They're going to have to keep building and progressing offensively if they want to do that. But for now, they're flying home from Charlottesville back to Pittsburgh as winners, 37-7. They just won an ACC game by 30 points. And did it include 2 defensive touchdowns? It did. And you know what? Good teams score defensive touchdowns too. Those count. So credit to Pitt for the 30-point win over an ACC opponent. Virginia's not very good, but just because a team's not very good doesn't mean it's a sure thing that you're going to get over on them. So Pitt wins 37-7. They're 6-4 overall. They're 3-3 in the ACC. Make sure you stay tuned at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com for all of our coverage through the weekend. Jim Hammett is in Charlottesville. He's going to have lots of coverage from postgame. He's probably already got it up there right now while we've been talking on this postgame show. So we'll go and check out everything Jim has from postgame. And then, of course, the conversation on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Lots of Pitt coverage there, and of course right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Click that subscribe button, like this video while you're here. We appreciate everybody who tuned in for the live stream. It's been a lot of fun, as it always is. I hope you had a great Saturday. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend. We'll be back on Monday morning with the Morning Pitt, and until then, have a great weekend, folks. Enjoy it. Pitt won. You can take some solace in that. And enjoy your weekend. See what happens the rest of the way. But thanks again for tuning in. We appreciate everybody who watched the live stream or later in the day, whenever you check it out. And yeah, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.